Well, he ran like the devil himself was chasing him, boots hammering the platform, hat flying off his head, lungs burning, screaming at a train that was already moving. Up. This train! The engineer didn't stop. The conductor didn't stop. Well, she did. Evelyn Harper turned around, suitcase in hand, one foot already on the step, and looked at the dusty, that cowboy sailor sprinting toward her like his entire life depended on the next 30 seconds. It did. And so did hers. If this story moves you, hit subscribe and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The suitcase wasn't heavy. That was the saddest part. Evelyn Harper had come to Red Hollow, Montana with 2 trunks, a leather satchel, 3 reference letters from respected men in Boston, enough hope to fill a cathedral. She had spent 7 months in this town. 7 months of early mornings and late nights, of careful records and honest work, of believing that if she simply did her job well, the rest would follow. She was leaving with 1 suitcase. 1. Everything else had been taken, not stolen in the dark of night, not lost in some accident. Taken in broad daylight by people who smiled at her face while they signed papers behind her back. Written by a town that had used her skill, used her knowledge, used her honesty, and then turned on her the moment her honesty became inconvenient. The summer of 1886 was brutal in Montana. The air tasted like iron and dry grass. The platform at Red Hollow Station was warped and sun-bleached, the wood cracking under boots that had crossed it 1,000 times. A few travelers waited in small clusters, speaking in low voices. He was speaking to Evelyn. Nobody had spoken to Evelyn in weeks. She stood at the edge of the platform, watching the great iron locomotive breathe in slow, rhythmic gusts, like a giant animal preparing to run. In 3 minutes, she calculated, the doors would close. But in 4, the train would begin to move. In 5, Red Hollow would be behind her. She had been counting down to those 5 minutes for 4 days. Conductor, a short man with a ginger mustache and a pocket watch, he consulted every 30 seconds. Glanced at her. "You boarding, miss?" "Yes," Evelyn said. She did not look back at the town. She had made that mistake twice already. Looked back on the familiar storefronts, the painted signs, the church steeple she had once found beautiful, and felt something dangerous move through her chest. Something that felt like grief, pretending to be hesitation. She couldn't afford hesitation, because she had learned that lesson the hard way. Evelyn Harper had grown up in Boston, the daughter of a land accountant who taught her numbers and contracts the way other fathers taught their daughters embroidery and French. She could read a ledger the way a musician reads sheet music, fast, precise, and with an ear for the notes that didn't belong. Her father's firm closed dozens of land deals before she was 22. Her father died. The firm was absorbed. Her position evaporated. Polite men in expensive suits explained, very gently, that they simply didn't feel a woman was suited for the client-facing aspects of the work. She had nodded. She had thanked them, and then she had come west, where the newspapers said there was land, opportunity, and people who needed exactly the skills she had. What the newspapers had not mentioned was Victor Harrington. He was still months away when she stepped off a different train, the one arriving in Red Hollow with her 2 trunks and her 3 letters and her hope. She had found work almost immediately. A property management firm called Caldwell & Marsh hired her as a land records clerk. The work was straightforward: filing deeds, cross-referencing surveys, commerces, maintaining correspondence with the Territorial Land Office. She was faster and more accurate than the 2 men who had done the job before her. Next weeks, she was managing entire portfolios. Within 3 months, she had found 3 separate clerical errors in the company's records that, left uncorrected, would have cost their clients thousands of dollars. Partners praised her, called her a find, said she had a gift. And then she found something that wasn't a clerical error. It was a Tuesday in March when she first saw a notation in a deed transfer that made her stop. A parcel of land that had changed hands in a way that didn't match the corresponding survey. The dates were wrong. The signatures didn't align with the witness records. On its own, it could have been a mistake. She made a note. Kept looking. She found another one and another. By the time she had traced the pattern across 47 separate transactions, each one a small piece of a much larger puzzle, she understood what she was looking at. One was stealing land, not through violence, not through obvious fraud, through paperwork, through small, careful forgeries, buried inside dozens of legitimate transactions, almost impossible to detect unless you knew exactly what you were looking for and had the patience to look for it for months. The man at the center of it all had a name. She didn't know it yet. But she had enough to know that what she was holding was dangerous. She had made the wrong decision. Later, alone on this platform with one suitcase, she could admit that to herself. Others, not the decision to investigate that had been right. Deeply right, the kind of right that lives in the bones. The wrong decision was what she did next. She had gone to her employer, had walked into Robert Caldwell's office on a Wednesday morning with a neatly organized folder of evidence, laid it on his desk, explained, careful, professional terms, what had found. Caldwell had listened. His face had been very still, very controlled. "Thank you, Miss Harper," he had said. "I'll look into this personally." 3 days later, she was dismissed, not for the investigation. Of course not for the investigation. Irreconcilable professional differences, for an unwillingness to work within the established protocols of the firm, for conduct unbecoming of a junior employee. She had stood in that office, holding her personal belongings in a box, and looked Robert Caldwell in the eye. She said, not a question. He didn't flinch. "I think it's best if you leave quietly, Miss Harper. For everyone's sake, especially yours." She had not left quietly. Into the town newspaper, she had given the editor, a young idealistic man named Fletcher, every document she had. Fletcher had been excited, passionate. He had promised her the story would run the following week. And the town turned. She had underestimated what money could do to a community, underestimated how fast reputation could be dismantled. Quickly, people who had smiled at her, shared meals with her, thanked her for her work, how quickly they could be convinced that she was actually a troublemaker, even with an axe to grind, an outsider who had never really understood how things worked out here. Voices that said these things weren't loud. They didn't have to be. Alderman, who ran the boarding house where Evelyn lived, told her quietly over breakfast one morning that she thought it might be better for everyone if Evelyn found other accommodations. I was sorry, she really was. But her husband felt the editor, Fletcher, stopped returning her messages. When she finally caught him on the street, he didn't look at her. "The story's been pulled," he said. "There were legal concerns." "I'm sorry, Miss Harper." "I really am. Legal concerns," Evelyn repeated. "Please don't make this harder than it has to be." One by one, doors closed. The lawyer who had initially agreed to review her evidence suddenly had scheduling conflicts. The territorial land commissioner, who she'd written to, never responded. A woman who had called herself Evelyn's friend Martha Dawes, whose husband farmed a small piece of land north of town, stopped sitting with her at church. That was the one that broke something in her, not shattered, old, just broke. The way a bone breaks, holding, still standing, but wrong inside. She had bought a train ticket that afternoon. She said to the conductor again. She lifted the suitcase, put her foot on the step. "Stop this train." The voice came from somewhere behind her, raw, desperate, completely undignified, and something about the rawness of it made her stop before she had even consciously decided to stop. He was running, not jogging, not hurrying, the kind of running that burns every reserve a man has, sacrifices dignity and grace entirely in favor of pure animal forward motion. His hat was already gone, lost somewhere back on the platform. His hair was wild. His leather vest was streaked with dust that suggested he had been riding very hard for a very long time before he got here. Broad through the shoulders, his face, even at this distance, even contorted with the effort of running, was the face of a man who spent his life outside, weathered in a way that spoke of hard seasons, real ones. She had never seen him before. He reached the platform stairs and took them 3 at a time. Harper. She froze. He knew her name. The conductor stepped forward. "Sir, this train is departing." I know it's departing. The cowboy was breathing hard, hands on his knees for just a moment, pulling air back into his body. I need 2 minutes, please. He looked up, looked directly at Evelyn. 2 minutes, Miss Harper, that's all I'm asking. Sir, I don't know you, Evelyn said. I know. He straightened, pressed his hat against his chest or where his hat would have been. Realized he'd lost it. Let his hand fall awkwardly to his side. My name is Cole Bennett. I run Bennett Valley Ranch, about 20 miles east of here, and I know what happened to you. Sure. I know what they did. He paused. I know who did it. The platform was very quiet. Always. Even the locomotive seemed to have steadied its breathing. Everyone in this county knows what happened to me, Evelyn said. Or they think they do. They know the version Victor Harrington paid to have told, Cole said. Sir, I know a different one. The name hit her like a hand to the chest. Victor Harrington. She had never told the newspaper editor that name. She had never spoken it publicly, never written it in any document she released. The evidence she had compiled pointed at him. Anyone with her level of training who read it carefully would have gotten there. But she had withheld the name itself, knowing she needed more before she could make that charge stick. That name again, Evelyn said. Victor Harrington. Cole's eyes didn't waver. You found it too, didn't you? You found what he's doing to the land records. The conductor cleared his throat. Here, miss. One moment, Evelyn said without looking at him. She studied Cole Bennett, looking for the angle, looking for the small shift in expression, the too careful language, the practiced pause. She had learned in 7 months to look for those things. She didn't find them. What she found instead was something she hadn't seen on a face in a long time. Earned desperation. The kind that can't be faked. It doesn't come from strategy, it comes from having already lost everything except this one last attempt. You have 2 minutes, Evelyn said. Cole Bennett had not planned what he was going to say. He had ridden 20 miles on a horse named Reckless, a name that had seemed ironic when he bought her and felt entirely appropriate now after getting word from a man named Sam Petty, who worked at the telegraph office, that Evelyn Harper had purchased a train ticket to Chicago. Not planned. He had just ridden. Standing on this platform now, the woman's gray eyes cutting through him like a surveyor's level, himself working through what he actually needed to say, not what he had hoped to say during the ride, which had been better organized in his head, but the real version, honest one. My father built Bennett Valley from nothing, he began. 30 years ago, he came out here with $60 and 2 horses and a piece of paper that said he could homestead 300 acres if he could work it. He worked it, he built it into something. When he died last year, he left me 1,200 acres, 200 head of cattle, and a ranch that pays its debts and keeps its people fed. He paused. 3 months ago, a company called Western Frontier Holdings sent me a letter. They said they had documentation proving that part of my land, the East Meadow pasture, our best grazing land on the property, was never legally titled to my father. They said the original homestead filing had an error. They knew about the error and hid it, that therefore the transfer of property at his death was invalid. Can I see the documentation they sent? Cole blinked. Expected. He wasn't sure what he had expected. Apathy, maybe. Or skepticism, not a direct, immediate, professional question. I have it at the ranch. What about the original homestead filing? There's original filing? I have that too. Survey records? Correspondence with the Territorial Land Office from that period? Miss Harper, do you have them or not? Yes. I have everything my father ever saved, and he saved everything. Something shifted in her face. Not softness exactly. More like attention. The look of someone whose mind has just begun to move. Your father's filing had an error, she said. They received a patent, the final government certification. Yes. Then the error, if it existed, was the government's responsibility to catch before issuing the patent. The patent is issued, the land is yours. A private company claiming otherwise without a court order and a very specific set of circumstances is not a legal claim. The Cole stared at her. I know that, he said. I can't prove it's a tactic. Without a complete review of the documentation trail, referenced against the territorial records to show that the alleged error either doesn't exist or was manufactured after the fact. She looked at him steadily, which is exactly what I was doing for the past 7 months before your town decided I was the problem. The conductor stepped forward again. The train, I'm not getting on the train, Evelyn said. Cole felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been coiled very tight for a very long time. But, she added, with a look at Cole that made the loosening stop immediately. I'm going to see the documents first. If what you're describing is what I think it is, Mr. Bennett, this isn't just about your ranch, I know, Cole said. Tell me what else you know. They stood on the platform for 40 minutes. The train departed without her. The conductor shook his head in that particular way of men who have decided not to understand women who make unexpected decisions. It was fine. Evelyn had long since stopped worrying about what conductors thought of her. Cole told her everything. He told her about the other ranchers who had received similar letters. 3 of them he knew by name, and he suspected more he didn't know about. He told her about the hired men who had appeared in the valley over the past month, setting the boundaries of properties, making notes, occasionally confronting farmers and ranchers with vague warnings dressed up as friendly advice. Or about the land office clerk in town, a young man named Briggs who had seemed nervous lately, who had started avoiding Cole's eyes when they passed on the street. Or about Victor Harrington. Or rather, he told her what he knew about Harrington than she knew, which was less than she knew, but the pieces fit together in ways that made the picture clearer. Victor Harrington had arrived in Montana Territory 4 years ago. Nobody knew exactly where he had come from St. Louis, said, or Kansas City. He had money, that much was obvious. And money in the West, in 1886, was enough to make a man's past irrelevant. He invested in a hotel, a general store, a stake in a small silver mine. None of it was remarkable. None of it explained the level of land acquisition that Evelyn had documented. He's using intermediaries, Evelyn said. The purchases I traced weren't in his name directly. They went through a series of shell companies, each one legitimate on its face, with different principles listed. Western Frontier Holdings, Cole said. There are at least 5 others, possibly more. Cole looked at her. How long did it take you to figure that out? 4 months, Evelyn said. I had the original territorial survey, records the full set, plus the copies held locally. I could have done it in 6 weeks. Why didn't you get the original records? Because the day I requested them from the Territorial Land Office, I told Caldwell what I was looking for. She didn't realize until later that the clerk at the land office, the one who took my request, was the same clerk who had been handling the processing of Western Frontier's filings. Cole was quiet for a moment. Briggs, he said. I don't know his name. Young man. Brown hair, works the west counter at the land office. Yes, Evelyn said. Cole pressed his lips together. His expression was the expression of a man who had just had a suspicion confirmed and found no satisfaction in the confirmation whatsoever. He's been there 3 years, Cole said. His father is a good man. He would be devastated. His father isn't the one who compromised land records for an entire territory. No, Cole agreed. He's not. Here was the part Cole had not planned to say. Here was the part that had been sitting in his chest for the entire 20-mile ride, that had started to move up his throat as he ran across that platform. He had nearly said 3 different times in the past 40 minutes, and each time pulled back because he wasn't sure how to say it without it sounding like something it wasn't. He said, I need you to understand something. She looked at him. I'm not asking you to do this because I need a woman who's good with numbers, he said. There are men in this territory who are good with numbers. I'm not asking you because you have nowhere else to go. Chicago is a real option for you, and both of us know it. He stopped. I'm asking you because what you built over those 7 months, what you put together before they took it from you, that didn't just disappear because they fired you and ran you out of town. The work was real. The findings were real. And I think you know that Victor Harrington is using that same machine right now to destroy people like my father's neighbors. There's families, people who don't have anyone who can read what he's doing. Evelyn was very still. "What I'm asking," Cole said, "is whether you're willing to finish what you started." The platform was empty now. The train was long gone. Someone had left a newspaper on the bench nearby, and the wind had started to move it, page by page. Evelyn looked at the end of the platform, then back at Cole. "Help you," she said. "And we expose Harrington, what happens to you?" "The ranch? That depends on what we find. And if it's worse than what you're expecting." Cole almost smiled. "Hey, Miss Harper, I've been expecting the worst since the day that letter arrived. I'm just trying to make sure that if I go down, I don't go down having let good people get buried alongside me." It was the right thing to say. She didn't show it immediately, Evelyn Harper. He was already beginning to understand, almost nothing immediately. But something in her posture changed. "I need full access to everything your father saved. You have it. I'll need somewhere to work. I have it. With a lock on the door. There's a study at the ranch. Debbie goes in there. It was my father's. I'll need to be able to come and go from the land office without being watched." Cole paused. "Runs harder." "I know it is. I'll work on it." "One more thing," Evelyn said. "And anything, if I find something, you don't expect something that implicates people you know, people you respect, people in your community. I'm not going to set it aside because it's uncomfortable. I'm going to follow where the evidence leads. Can you live with that?" Cole met her eyes. "It's the only kind of truth I'm interested in," he said. At once, very precisely, the nod of a woman who made decisions like she made calculations thoroughly, awareness of the margin for error, and then completely. "Right, Mr. Bennett," Evelyn Harper said, "take me to your ranch." The ride out to Bennett Valley took 3 hours. Cole had not planned for the contingency of a passenger on his return trip. There was no second horse. Evelyn Harper, who had grown up in Boston and had not ridden a horse since she was 14, behind him on reckless, with her suitcase balanced across the saddlebag in a way that satisfied neither of them aesthetically but held together functionally. She did not complain about it. He respected that. They didn't talk much for the first hour. He had a habit of silence that came from years of working land alone, not an unfriendly silence. There's just the silence of a man who had never had much cause to fill the air with words when there was no particular reason to do so. He would learn, had a different kind of silence. Silence was active. She was quiet, the way a person is quiet when they're processing, when things are being sorted and categorized and filed in the internal ledger that was apparently always running behind her gray eyes. It was past the first hour, when the land opened up and the Bennett Valley started to show itself in the distance, that she spoke. "How many other ranchers did you say received letters from Western Frontier?" "3 that I know, personally. I think there are more who haven't said anything yet." "Why wouldn't they say anything?" "Fear. Hoping the problem will go away if they ignore it long enough." "The letters, are they demanding purchase or just claiming ownership?" "Claiming ownership first. Purchase comes later, I'm told, at significantly below market value." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "Pattern," she said, almost to herself. "That pattern, the way this particular scheme works, is intimidation, establish a legal cloud over the title, create uncertainty. Phase 2 is acquisition offer to buy the disputed property at a reduced price to make the problem go away. Phase 3 is resale. Once enough adjacent parcels are acquired, consolidate and sell as a large holding, or develop it at full market value or better." She paused. "It's elegant, terrible way. Each individual transaction looks like a resolution to a dispute. They seize the larger picture unless they have access to all the transactions simultaneously, which is what you had. Which is what I was building," she corrected. Unfinished. Cole guided Reckless around a dry wash. The afternoon sun was heavy on his shoulders. "Can you finish it?" he asked. "Access to the original survey records, the original homestead filings, and the complete transaction history from Western Frontier, yes. Even without the land office's cooperation." She was quiet for a beat. "There are copies," she said. "The territorial records have copies held at 3 locations. The land office in Helena, the county recorder's office, federal district court, which maintains its own archive." She paused. "Harrington can influence the local offices. He can't touch the federal archive. You already knew that, Cole said. Our bought. I knew that before I bought the train ticket, she said. "Yes." She stopped. Didn't have a reason to use it, Cole said. "Yes." She didn't answer, but she didn't deny it either. They arrived at Bennett Valley Ranch in the late afternoon. They had three full-time ranch hands, Hector Reyes, a Mexican-American horseman who had been with the ranch since Cole's father's time, Pete, who was 60-something and had forgotten more about cattle than most men ever learned, and a young man named Danny Marsh, who was 16 and worked with the kind of furious enthusiasm that Cole recognized as the energy of someone who had not yet been broken by anything. Well, there was also a housekeeper, a stout and efficient woman named Mrs. Garza, who came 3 days a week and ran the domestic operations of the ranch with the same unhurried authority that Hector brought to the horses. Cole and Evelyn rode in. All three ranch hands found various reasons to be working in the immediate vicinity of the front yard. Cole did not miss this. "Miss Harper will be staying in the guest room," he said. Enough for all of them to hear without appearing to her. "She'll be working in Father's study. The study is locked." "It stays locked." Hector nodded with the economy of a man who communicated in gestures. Old Pete looked at Evelyn with the frank assessment of a man who had stopped performing social niceties sometime around 1870. "You the woman who found Harrington's scheme?" he said. Evelyn glanced at Cole. "Word travels," Cole said. "I'm the woman who started to find it," Evelyn said carefully. "Haven't finished yet." Old Pete nodded slowly. "Good," he said. "Then maybe this time you finish it before they try to stop you." The weight of that landed somewhere in Evelyn's chest, not painfully, more like ballast, something heavy and real that steadied her. "Us," she said. "That's the plan." Cole's father's study had not been touched since the funeral. Cole stood in the doorway for a moment before he opened it, and Evelyn did not look at his face while he did it. She had enough understanding of grief to know that some moments needed to be given their full private weight. Then he stepped back and let her go in first. The room smelled of paper and old leather, sailing shelves on 3 walls, a desk made of heavy oak, hard in ways that told you it had been used hard and well for decades. Cabinets along the west wall, each one labeled in a handwriting that was deliberate, the handwriting of a man who took careful care of things. Evelyn stood in the middle of the room and turned slowly. She had seen good record-keeping before. Professional firms in Boston with trained archivists, government offices with dedicated filing systems. She had never seen anything like this. "They labeled everything," she said. "He was particular," Cole said. He used to say that a ranch that couldn't account for itself in writing was a ranch that was one disaster away from losing everything. "He was right," Evelyn said. She moved to the filing cabinets, opened the first drawer. Files were organized by year, then by category, alphabetically within category. Every document had a date. Every date was accurate. Every transaction had at least 2 corresponding documents. 30 years of records, complete intact. She closed the drawer very carefully. "Cole," she said. "Cole." She turned to face him. The first time since the train platform, for the first time in longer than she could honestly remember, Evelyn Harper felt something she had almost forgotten existed, like she was in the right place. "These records," she said, "are the foundation of a complete case, not just against Western Frontier's claim on your land, but against the entire scheme. How long will it take?" She looked at the cabinets, at the desk, at the shelves. "How long do you have?" 45 days, Cole said. "That's when Western Frontier's claim goes before the county land court." 45 days, Evelyn repeated. She nodded slowly. "I'll need the list of other ranchers who received letters. I can ride to them tomorrow. I'll need access to the county recorder's office." Through the front door. Cole frowned. "There's a night clerk I might be able to talk to." "Talk to him." "And I'll need you to understand something," Evelyn said. I waited. "When I find what I'm looking for, and I will find it, the people who tried to destroy my reputation will be in that evidence. The people who fired me, the people who convinced this town I was the problem." She held his gaze. "There, that's going to be uncomfortable. For some people you know. Some people this town respects." "I know you said you could live with that. I meant it." She studied him for one more long moment. All right, she said. Then we have 45 days to take down Victor Harrington. Cole nodded. I better not waste any of them, he said. He left her there, in a room full of his father's records, in the last light of a long and terrible and somehow possibly hopeful day. And Evelyn Harper sat down at the oak desk on the first file and began. That night, a cat was on the front steps of the ranch house and looked out at the dark valley. He had made a gamble today. He knew it. He was not a man who lied to himself about the nature of his own choices. He had ridden 20 miles on half a rumor, stopped a departing train on no authority whatsoever, and convinced a woman he had never met to postpone, leaving a town that had broken her, based on nothing more than his word and a shared enemy. It was the most reckless thing he had done in his adult life. He sat with that for a while. The valley was quiet in the way it only was after sunset, the particular quiet of land that is alive and resting, the creek reaching him faintly from half a mile east, occasional stir of cattle in the far pasture. His father had loved this land, the romantic love that men who didn't work land sometimes talked about the big sky, the horizon poetry of the West. His father had loved it the way a man loves something he has personally built, cost him something real, that has given him something real in return. He had grown up understanding land that way, as a relationship, as a responsibility. He was not going to let it be taken. From inside the study, through the single window that faced the front of the house, he could see the faint, warm glow of the lamp that Evelyn had lit. She was still working. He had checked the clock in the kitchen before coming outside. It was nearly midnight. She had been working for 5 hours. Cole felt something he couldn't quite name, not quite admiration. Because admiration implied distance, and what he felt was closer. Not gratitude, though that was in there too. Something that had to do with recognition. Recognition of someone who moved through the world the same way you did, the way forward or not at all. He went to bed. Lump in the study stayed on. She found the first major anomaly at 2 a.m. Then had a system. She always had a system. It was the only way to work with large volumes of documents without losing your mind or your thread. She began with the original homestead filing, cross-referenced it with the patent botters, then worked forward through every subsequent transaction, records, boundary surveys, rights agreements, any and all correspondence with government offices. The Bennett family records were extraordinary. Arthur Bennett, Cole's father, had kept every single document, annotated many of them in that large, deliberate handwriting, and organized everything with a precision that Evelyn found quietly moving. He was a man who had understood that his family's future lived in paper. However, he had been right. And in the meticulous paper record of a careful, honest man, the forgery stood out like a wrong note in a familiar song. In a boundary survey from 1879. The original survey in 1856, when Arthur Bennett first staked his homestead, described the east boundary of the property using a set of landmark references that were standard for the period: a creek bend, a big rock formation, a line of cottonwood trees. Evelyn had seen that description in the original filing. The 879 survey used slightly different language, not dramatically different, or obviously different, changed in the way that a careful forger would change it not to be immediately obvious, to shift the legal description of the east boundary by approximately 200 yards. 200 yards that happened to encompass the entire East Meadow pasture. Well, the same pasture that Western Frontier Holdings was now claiming didn't belong to the Bennett estate. Evelyn sat back in Arthur Bennett's chair. Her hands were completely steady. She had learned early in her career that the moment of finding something important was not a moment for excitement. Excitement clouded judgment. What this moment required was precision, careful documentation of exactly what she had found, exactly where she had found it, exactly why it was significant. A fresh sheet of paper from the desk drawer. She began to write. By the time she was done, the paper held a clear summary of the discrepancy, the original language, altered language, the specific implications, and the legal significance. She went back to the files because one forgery was not a case. And forgery was a start. Cole found her at 5:30 in the morning. He had risen before the sun, as he always did, and had gone to the kitchen to start coffee. More, and had noticed on his way past that the lamp was still burning. "Come in," Evelyn said. She was sitting exactly where he had left her at the desk, surrounded by organized stacks of documents that had not been there the previous evening. Her hair, which had been neatly pinned when she arrived, partially escaped whatever arrangement she had put it in, and there were ink smudges on her right hand and her left wrist. She looked completely alert. "Did you sleep?" Cole said. "Close." No, she said it without apology or performance. Simply a fact. On something. She handed him the paper. Cole was not a trained reader of legal documents. He was not unintelligent, and he had spent enough time with his father's records over the years to understand the basic architecture of a land description. He read the paper twice. Then he looked up at her. "They changed the survey," he said. "Yes. In 1879. Yes, my father. He would have been." Cole stopped. Calculated. He would have been in Kansas City in the fall of 1879, a cattle herd there every autumn. Evelyn looked at him carefully. "Is there anyone else managing the ranch while he was gone?" "A foreman. A man named Holt. He left the ranch in 1880, moved east somewhere." Cole stopped again. "My father mentioned once that Holt had left under some kind of disagreement. He never said what. Do you know where Holt is now?" "No, we should try to find out." Cole put the paper down. He looked at the organized stacks around the desk, and then at the woman who had arranged them and who had been awake all night arranging them, and who was now looking at him with the kind of focused, clear-eyed attention that made him feel like the conversation was only going to get more serious from here. "Listen, one night," he said. "I found one piece of it," Evelyn said. "Forgery in the survey confirms that the fair western frontier is claiming existed before Sound 879 was introduced in 1879. That's significant, but it doesn't prove who introduced it or who directed the introduction. And it doesn't connect this to the larger scheme. But it's a start. It's a very good start," she said. Cole set 2 cups of coffee on the edge of the desk. And Evelyn picked hers up without looking at it, the automatic gesture of someone who had drunk many cups of coffee at many desks in many early mornings. "I'm going to ride out to the Pearson place today," Cole said. "Rawson, James Pearson got one of those Western Frontier letters last month. I want to look at his documents. Get copies of everything they sent him," Evelyn said. "The original letter and any subsequent correspondence, and any land documents he has on file, original filings. Is anything. He's not going to understand why." "Tell him I'm reviewing all the claims," Evelyn said. She paused. "Tell him I think they're using the same document in multiple claims. They copied the same forgery and filed it against multiple properties." Cole looked at her. "Is that true?" "I don't know yet," Evelyn said. "But if I'm right about how this scheme works, there'd be the logical approach. One manufactured survey error filed as an amendment to multiple properties in the same period. Each individual rancher sees only his own claim. Nobody sees the pattern." She set down her coffee. "I will." Cole left an hour later. Evelyn went back to the files. By the time Mrs. Garza arrived at 7:30 and knocked on the study door to offer breakfast, Evelyn had found 3 more anomalies, each one small, each one precise, each one a tiny, deliberate wound in the record of an honest man's life's work. She ate breakfast at the desk. She kept working. Somewhere outside, she could hear Danny Marsh talking to the horses in the way that young men with no self-consciousness talk to animals unself-conscious, occasionally funny. She could hear Old Pete's unhurried boots on the porch. She could hear the ranch breathing around her, living its daily life, aware that the woman working in Arthur Bennett's study was slowly, document by document, building the case that would either save it or prove that saving it was impossible. Evelyn Harper did not believe in impossible. She believed in incomplete. And she had 37 more filing cabinet drawers to open. She opened the next one. She kept going. Cole came back from the Pearson place in the late afternoon, the look on his face that Evelyn recognized immediately. It was the look of a man who had gone out expecting bad news and come back carrying something worse. She was still at the desk. She had not left the study except twice, once for the outhouse, once to refill her coffee cup from the kitchen. The stacks around her had grown and reorganized themselves into something that looked to an untrained eye like chaos and was in fact a very precise map of 30 years of fraudulent activity. Cole dropped a leather satchel on the corner of the desk. "There's James Pearson's documents," he said. Evelyn opened the satchel without ceremony and began pulling files. "Who is he?" she asked. "Scared," Cole said. "He's got a wife and 4 kids and 300 acres that have been in his family for 12 years. He's been losing sleep over this for a month and hasn't told his wife the full extent of it because he doesn't want her to be scared too." He paused, "Which means she's already scared because she can feel that something's wrong and he won't tell her what it is." "That's the worst kind of scared," Evelyn said, looking up from the documents. She pulled out the letter from Western Frontier Holdings. "Read it again." "Cole." Something in her voice made him straighten. "Yes." She held up the letter. "Now look at this." She pulled the corresponding letter from his own file, the one Western Frontier had sent to Bennett Valley, and laid them side by side on the desk. Cole leaned in. The letters were almost identical. Similar. Identical, the same sentence structures, the same legal language, the same 3-paragraph format. Only the names, the property descriptions, and the specific dates of the alleged filing errors had been changed. "They used a template," Cole said. "They used a template." Evelyn confirmed, "which means this wasn't tailored to your property or to Pearson's property specifically. Identified properties they wanted to acquire, identified a legal mechanism, the alleged filing error, and they applied the same mechanism to each one." She set the letters down, which means the forgeries in the survey records are also templated. Variations on the same document, not individual pieces of fraud. "Can you prove that?" "I need the survey records from Pearson's property." She looked at the satchel. "Are they in here?" Cole nodded. "He gave me everything he had." She pulled the files on the surveys, opened the 1,879 filing. The language was different from Bennett's. First, it was different property, different landmarks, different legal descriptions. But the structure of the alteration, the way the boundary language had been shifted, the specific type of amendment notation used, the particular style of the handwritten addition was the same. On the other hand, someone sat down and forged multiple survey amendments in one session, Evelyn said, probably in one sitting, maybe 2, then filed them separately over a period of months to avoid pattern detection. "Is that enough to prove the forgeries?" "It's enough to establish the forgeries as connected. Prove they're forgeries as opposed to honest mistakes. I need a handwriting comparison against authenticated documents from the same period." She paused. "I need to know who was physically inside the land office in 1,879 with access to the amendment filing system." Cole was quiet for a moment. "Briggs," he said. "Briggs wasn't there in 1,879. He's too young." "Then who was?" "That's what I need to find out." She looked at him. Who was in that land office in 1,879 who had both the access and the skill to do this? Well, they didn't act alone. This requires knowledge of which properties to target, which means someone was directing them. But the person with the pen, the person who actually made the alterations, that person is still identifiable. Cole sat down in the chair across from the desk, the chair where Evelyn imagined Arthur Bennett had sat countless times across from people discussing the ranch's business. A heavy, solid chair. It suited Cole's frame. The land office administrator in 1,879, Cole said slowly. A man named Gerald Crane. He retired maybe 6-7 years ago. Lives in Billings now, I think. Evelyn looked up. Them? My father knew him. They weren't close, but my father mentioned him. Once said Crane had gotten above himself toward the end of his time at the office. Something felt off about him in his last few years. Cole paused. Father said that about maybe 3 people in his entire life. A suspicious man. Could you reach Crane in Billings? I could try. Don't try, Evelyn said. Almost smiled. Yes, ma'am, he said, which was not a term he typically used, but seemed to fit the moment precisely, and went back to the documents. Cole went to send a telegraph. But neither of them knew, as that second day folded into evening, was that they were already being watched. The hired man's name was Dylan, was one of 4 riders that Victor Harrington kept on permanent retainer for what Harrington called property management activities, a phrase that meant many things, of them involving actual property management. Dylan was not the smartest of the 4, but he was the most patient, and patience was the quality Harrington valued most in that particular type of work. Dylan had been positioned on the ridge above Bennett Valley since the previous morning. Where he sat, with the long glass he'd been provided, he could see the ranch house, the front yard, the study window with its persistent lamp glow, and most importantly, who came and went. He had seen Cole leave in the morning and return in the afternoon with a satchel. He had seen the satchel go directly into the study, had noted the fact that the woman who had arrived yesterday, the one Harrington had called a complication, had not left the study in 2 days except for brief intervals. He also noted, with professional attention to detail, ranch hand Danny Marsh had twice in the past day made a point of walking the perimeter of the property in a pattern that was not entirely consistent with normal ranch work. Cowboy had posted a watch. Dylan was experienced enough to know that this meant things were moving faster than Harrington had anticipated. Up the long glass and rode back to town. Harrington received the report the following morning in the private back room of the hotel he owned over a breakfast he did not touch. Victor Harrington was 53 years old and had the face of a man who had been handsome once and had made peace with the fact that he was no longer handsome by becoming instead the kind of man whose appearance, Colorado, communicated something more useful than handsomeness, certainty, the absolute conviction of his own rightness. Well, he was not by nature a panicked man, but the woman in that study unsettled him in a way that the Bennett land dispute, on its own, never had. He had made a calculation 11 months ago when the news came to him about the land records clerk in Caldwell and Marsh, the one who had been found digging through the wrong files. He had moved quickly, efficiently, through channels that he had spent years establishing precisely for situations like this. The woman had been removed. The story had been managed. She had left town. He had considered the matter resolved. She was now in Cole Bennett's study. The fact that Cole Bennett had somehow found her and brought her back, this was not a development that fit his timeline. She's been in there since she arrived, Dylan said. Left except to eat and sleep, maybe not even to sleep. What did Bennett bring back from the Pearson place? A satchel, full. Harrington was still for a moment. Pearson. He had sent the letter to Pearson 3 months ago and received no response. That was typical. Most men sat on the letters for weeks, not knowing what to do. The fact that Pearson had apparently organized his documents and handed them over to Bennett's woman without even being approached. Did Pearson reach out to Bennett, or Bennett to Pearson? Bennett rode to Pearson, which meant Bennett was building a coalition, gathering evidence from multiple properties. The woman was clearly directing the effort, building the same cross-property analysis that had nearly exposed the scheme before. Harrington stood up. She's rebuilt what she had before, he said. Maybe more. Dylan didn't respond because the statement wasn't directed at him. She needs the territorial archive to finish it, Harrington continued. Local records won't be enough. She knows that. Before, he turned. Has Bennett made any contact with anyone in Helena? Sent a telegraph yesterday. Didn't get the text. Who did he send it to? Operator said it went to a private address in Billings. Billings. Harrington's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes shifted in a way that Dylan, who was experienced at reading powerful men, recognized as the shift that preceded decisive action. About who he's trying to reach in Billings, Harrington said. And do it today. Cole got the return telegraph the next morning. That Crane would speak with him. Not in Billings, Crane said. He would come to Red Hollow. He had been waiting, he wrote, for someone to ask these questions for a very long time. Cole read the message twice. Then he walked the study. Evelyn was at the desk. There were now 7 separate organized stacks around her, each labeled in her precise handwriting on a small card. She had at some point also created a large working diagram on a piece of drafting paper that she had pinned to the wall beside the desk, a visual map of property transactions, connected by lines that showed the flow of money and ownership through various holding companies. Paul looked at the diagram for a long moment. "You made a map," he said. "I think better when I can see the whole structure at once." She glanced at it. The red lines are confirmed fraudulent transactions. Black lines are legitimate. The blue lines are transactions I haven't verified yet. There were many more red lines than Cole had expected. "Any properties?" he asked. "Confirmed with documentation 17. She paused. "Suspected based on pattern analysis 31. Cole felt the number land somewhere in his sternum. "Animal families. Crane will come here," he said. He handed her the telegraph. "He says he's been waiting to be asked." Evelyn read the message. Read it again. Her expression was careful, the careful of someone who knew that unexpected good news was sometimes a different kind of bad news in disguise. "What do you know about him?" she asked. "Really know not what your father said. You actually know yourself." "I was a kid when Crane was at the land office," Cole said. "I remember him as a large man, formal liked his position. Similar to my father's ranch, once for a property line dispute, maybe 1,880 or so. I remember my father being very polite to him. And then after he left, not saying anything at all, which was my father's way of expressing profound distaste." 1,880, Evelyn said. 1 year after the surveys were altered. They looked at each other. "He might be coming to confess," Evelyn said. "Or he might be coming to find out what we know." "Could be both," Cole said. Evelyn said, "It could be both." She set down the telegraph. "When does he arrive?" 4 days. Then I have 4 days to know everything I possibly can before he walks through that door." She turned back to the diagram. "Old Pete to keep his eyes open on the south road." Cole blinked. "Hi, old Pete." "Because he's the one who's been watching the ridge," Evelyn said, looking up. "And because whatever's been on that ridge for the past 2 days should know that we can see them too." Cole went very still. "You knew we were being watched." "Since yesterday morning," Evelyn said. "The reflection from the long glass, it moved the wrong way for sunlight on a rock. Told Danny to keep doing exactly what he's been doing. Don't change any patterns. But tell old Pete quietly that if anyone comes onto this property uninvited, I want to know within 10 minutes. Cole looked at the woman at the desk, the woman with ink on her hands, and her hair half escaped from its pins, who had not been on this property for 3 full days yet and had already identified the surveillance, for it, and built a response. "Is there anything you don't notice?" he asked. Evelyn looked up at him, and for just a moment, the briefest moment, there before it was gone, something that might have been humor moved through her gray eyes. "My train ticket," she said. "I apparently didn't notice that either." Cole laughed. "Guys, both of them." The laugh faded. It left behind did not. In the kitchen that evening, Evelyn finally came out of the study for a real meal, Mrs. Rosa had made beef stew and biscuits, and the smell had eventually penetrated even the document-focused singularity that Evelyn's brain became when she was deep in investigation mode. They ate at the kitchen table, just the two of them, Mrs. Rosa had gone home, the ranch hands had eaten earlier and were in the bunkhouse. It was the first time they had sat across from each other without documents between them. "Tell me about Boston," Cole said. Evelyn looked at him. Because I told you about my father and this ranch for 3 hours on that platform. I realized after the fact that I don't know anything about you except what you've chosen to show me in a professional context. That seems appropriate given that we've known each other for 4 days. Maybe," Cole said. "You know things about me that most people who've known me 20 years don't know. I told you about Holt, about my father's disappointment, letter arriving, and me sitting on the front steps for 2 hours before I could make myself go inside and read it properly." He looked at her steadily. "Personal. So tell me something personal." Evelyn ate a bite of stew. That quiet long enough that Cole thought she was simply going to decline her, and he was preparing to let it go. She owed him nothing beyond what they had agreed to when she spoke. The father taught me accounting the way other fathers teach their sons, she said. Daughters, sons, she paused. He had me doing real work by the time I was 14. Not practice exercises, actual client ledgers, actual filings. It would be wasteful not to use what I was clearly capable of. He sounds like a good man. He was a practical man, Evelyn said. And the practical part happened to align in my case, I've always been grateful for. He was not sentimental about it. He never told me I was exceptional or remarkable. He told me when my work was accurate and when it wasn't. Is that enough? Cole asked. There to be? Evelyn considered this seriously. It was enough to prepare me, she said. Whether it was enough to feel cared for, she stopped. Picked up her coffee cup. He died when I was 24. I never asked him those kinds of questions while he was alive. I was too focused on being competent enough to earn his professional respect. And did you? He told me, 2 months before he died, that I was the best natural reader of financial documents he had ever encountered. She set the cup down. Context, that was the equivalent of a declaration of profound love. Cole looked at her. He's gone, he said. So am I, Evelyn said. It was quiet for a moment, a different kind of quiet than the working silence of the study. Of quiet that has weight and texture and does not need to be filled. Not you, Evelyn asked. Your father didn't just leave you a ranch. He left you something in those records. All that documentation that's more than practicality. Doesn't keep 30-year records that carefully unless he's trying to tell someone something. Cole looked at his coffee cup. He used to say, when I was young and didn't understand why the records mattered, he used to say that a man's word is everything he is. A man's word dies with him. What lives on is the proof. He paused. He was terrified, I think, of leaving me something I couldn't protect. To make sure that everything he'd built, every honest transaction, every fair dealing was documented beyond dispute. He knew someone might try to take it, Evelyn said. Well, I think he knew the West was changing, Cole said. The men who came in the early days, when it was raw and the rules were simple, those men built things with their hands and their word. The men coming in now, they have lawyers and holding companies and documents that can say whatever they need to say. He looked at her. That the honest record was the only weapon an honest man had against that. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. I was right, she said. You're his weapon, Cole said. I kept thinking, riding out to find you. At corners, that he built those records his whole life, waiting for someone who could read them the way they needed to be read. And here you are. Something moved through Evelyn's face, not quite emotion, or rather, emotion contained with tremendous discipline. The way you contain something that if you let it out fully would change the whole shape of your composure. Don't make me into something poetic, she said quietly. The bookkeeper with a grudge and a very precise memory. Those are the most dangerous kind of person in a fight like this one, Cole said. Almost smiled. She went back to the study. 20 minutes later, she moved differently, not with more warmth. Exactly. With less focus. With something that was perhaps simply the knowledge that the person across the table from her was real, and not just an employer with a problem she had been hired to solve. Their threat came on the 5th day. It arrived in the form of a letter, delivered not through the post, but through a small boy, maybe 10 years old, of a farmer who lived 3 miles from the ranch, who rode up to the front yard in the early morning and handed Danny Marsh a sealed envelope addressed to the woman, currently residing at Bennett Ranch. Danny brought it to Cole. Cole brought it to Evelyn. She opened it at the desk, read it once. Then she set it down very carefully for a moment with her hands flat on the desk and her breathing very controlled. Cole, who had been watching her face, said, "What does it say?" She handed it to him. It was short. It said in precise and formal language, the undersigned, no name, no signature, was aware that Miss Evelyn Harper was conducting an unauthorized review of private land records on behalf of a party with a conflict of interest. That Miss Harper had previously been dismissed from a position of trust for professional misconduct. It stated that should she continue her current activities, Documentation of her prior misconduct would be submitted to the Territorial Bar Association, multiple newspaper editors across 3 territories, and the land record offices in Boston, Chicago, and New York, effectively ending any professional future she might otherwise have hoped to rebuild. It concluded, "A woman of your situation can ill afford another scandal. We suggest you reconsider your current arrangement and return to wherever you came from." Cole looked up from the letter. "Oh, it was tight. They're threatening you." "Yes," Evelyn said. Her voice was entirely level, with lies, with a version of the truth that has been carefully shaped to look like a different truth, Evelyn said. "There was a dismissal. There was a professional dispute. Those things are real. The interpretation of them, the misconduct framing, is Harrington's construction. In print, in letters sent to enough influential offices, construction is indistinguishable from the truth. Then we go after him before he can send those letters. He may have already sent them," Evelyn said. Cole went still. "This letter," she said, "is not a negotiation. It's a notification. He's telling me that the damage has already been done, already in motion, and stopping my work won't undo it. It'll just determine whether there's more damage to come." She picked the letter up again, looking at it with the analytical attention she brought to everything. "He wants me to panic, to make a decision based on fear rather than calculation." "Are you panicking?" She looked at him. "I am," she said, very angry. Cole had not expected that answer in that tone. The anger was not loud, it was the opposite of loud. It was the anger of someone who had kept very careful control for a very long time and had just seen the last thing they were protecting threatened. Cole said. "I need you to understand something," Evelyn said. If we continue, and he follows through on those letters, my professional reputation is likely destroyed regardless of what we prove here. Even if we expose every transaction, even if Harrington goes to prison, the version of my story that he's written may outlive the correction. That's how these things work. The accusation travels faster than the truth." Cole looked at her steadily. He asked. "I want you to understand the cost," she said. "Here I decide. I want you to understand that this is not just your ranch on the line now. The rest of my professional life, I understand. And I want you to understand that the families on that diagram, the 31 properties, families who don't know yet what's being done to them, this letter doesn't change what's happening to them." "No," Cole said. "It doesn't." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she folded the letter, put it in the top right drawer of the desk, and closed the drawer. "I need the county recorder's night clerk," she said. "Can you have that arranged by tomorrow? I'll ride to town today." "Go around the South Road," Evelyn said, "through town center." And he stopped at the doorway. She said. He nodded. He was gone before she could say anything else, which was probably for the best, as what she had almost said, standing in that study, surrounded by the evidence of 31 families and a diagram that was growing redder every day, was something considerably more personal than be careful. Called the next file from the cabinet. She had 29 days left. Went back to work. Cole reached town by noon. Found the night clerk, a young man named Abel Torres, 22 years old, working his way through a correspondence law course in the evenings and operating on almost no sleep at the back counter of the county recorder's office, not pretending to file documents and actually reading a legal textbook he'd hidden inside a folder. Cole had known Abel since the boy was 12, had given him work on the ranch 2 summers in a row when Abel's family had a bad growing season. Abel had worked hard, complained about nothing, and sent his wages home to his mother without being asked. Cole sat down across from him and spoke quietly. "I need to look at amendment filings from 1879, he said. "All set. Not the public desk copies, the originals." Abel looked at him. "Sir Bennett, I know what I'm asking. Those are restricted access. Administrative authorization required." "I know that too." Abel looked around the office. Back at Cole, "There's a man who comes in every Thursday afternoon," Abel said, a voice barely above a murmur, "asks to review filings. He doesn't have administrator authorization. He has something that looks like administrator authorization. I pulled the original authorization log 2 months ago and his name isn't in it. He paused. His name is Briggs. Cole leaned forward very slightly. Briggs has been accessing restricted filings without authorization, Cole said. I think he's been doing it for a long time, Abel said. I think he was doing it before I started here. I only noticed because he came in on a Tuesday 3 months ago instead of Thursday. I wasn't expecting him, and I watched him go to the restricted files without signing in. He swallowed, and trying to figure out what to do about it ever since. Abel, Cole said, I need you to do something that is going to feel like a large risk. How large? Significant. I also need you to understand that if what I think is happening is actually happening, the risk of doing nothing is larger. Abel Torres looked at his legal textbook. Cole, what do you need? He said. When Cole got back to the ranch that evening, Evelyn was at the desk as always. But she had moved the lamp to the corner and was working with 2 candles flanking the drafting paper on the wall, a change in setup that he was beginning to understand meant she had found something significant enough to alter her whole working posture. About Abel. She listened without interrupting, which she did when she was listening as hard as she could. When he finished, she said, Briggs has been accessing the restricted files to update them. That's what I think. Which means the forgeries in the original filings may have been compounded, additional amendments added more recently, reinforcing the original fraudulent alterations. She turned to the diagram, drew a new line, and it means Harrington has someone inside that office right now. Effective. Not just someone he used in 1879 and cut loose. This goes all the way to the present, Cole said. It was never not going to the present, Evelyn said. Close. A scheme like this doesn't run on old forgeries. It requires ongoing maintenance, to update files when questions arise, to intercept inquiries, like properties, before they become problems. She looked at him. That's why my request for the original territorial records was flagged before I even left the building. Briggs didn't just see it, he reported it. To Harrington, to whoever his contact is, which may or may not be Harrington directly. Cole sat down. The chair creaked in that familiar way. Abel will get us in on Thursday night, Cole said. Get us to the restricted originals, but he can get us to the amendment log. That's enough, Evelyn said immediately. If the amendment log shows Briggs' access on dates that correspond to new Western Frontier claim filings, then we have Briggs placing himself inside those files at the exact moments those files needed to be altered, Cole said. And looked at him. You've been thinking like a lawyer, she said. I've been listening to a very persuasive bookkeeper for 5 days, he said. Something in the room shifted the way pressure shifts before a storm. Not threatening, but charged. They were building something together in this room, night by night and document by document, and both of them could feel the shape of it becoming real. Thursday is 3 days from now, Evelyn said. Crane arrives the day after. Back to back, Cole said. We may not sleep much. We haven't slept much since you got here. No, Evelyn said. She looked at the diagram, at the red lines multiplying across it. The families behind each line, the Pearsons, the Marshes, Andersons, the half-dozen others she had now verified, a dozen more she suspected. Cole, she said. Yeah, when this is over, she stopped. Cole waited. When this is over, she said again, these families are going to need help rebuilding, not just legally, financially. The properties that were bought at below market prices need to be recovered or compensated. Who were coerced into selling need recourse. She paused. Not something I can do alone. It's not something a single lawyer can do. What are you saying? She turned from the diagram to look at him directly. I'm saying that exposing Harrington is the beginning, she said. The end. Cole held her gaze. He understood what she was saying beneath what she was saying. He understood it clearly and without needing it explained. Barty, she was not planning to leave when this was finished. Plus, he did not say that out loud. Then we better make sure we do this right the first time, he said. Evan turned back to the diagram. Yes, she said. But we better. She reached for the next file. Cole pulled his chair around the desk to sit beside her. Neither of them commented on the movement. They worked through the night. Crane arrived on a Wednesday, not Thursday, the telegraph had said. Wednesday, a full day early, announced, riding a rented horse from the stage stop at the edge of town and coming up the ranch road at a pace that suggested a man who had changed his mind about something and was moving before he could change it back. Cole saw him from the yard and knew immediately who he was. The man was in his late 60s, heavier than he'd been in 1,880 years, with white hair and the particular posture of someone who had spent decades behind a desk projecting authority and was now carrying that posture as a habit rather than a conviction. He dismounted carefully, the way old men do when their knees have opinions. Crane said. Mr. Crane. Cole didn't move toward him. You're a day early. I know. Crane looked at the ranch house. I need to speak with the woman. Cole studied him for 3 full seconds. He said. Crane met his eyes. And what was in Crane's eyes was not the careful calculation of a man managing a situation. It was something older and heavier and much harder to look at directly. I'm the one who altered the surveys, Crane said. It went completely quiet. Cole felt the words hit him, the way a physical impact hits not painful immediately, as the body needs a moment to understand what happened before it begins to hurt. Inside, Cole said. Evelyn heard them come in. She heard Cole's boots, she knew them. By now, 3 weeks into this arrangement, could distinguish Cole's stride from every other set of footsteps on this property. And she heard a second, heavier set she didn't recognize. She came out of the study before Cole knocked. Crane looked at her. You're younger than I expected, he said. Older than I expected, she said. Sit down. Crane sat at the kitchen table. Cole stood by the door. Evelyn pulled out the chair across from Crane and sat directly facing him. And she did not soften her posture or her expression, as this was not a moment for softness. Tell me everything, she said. Crane told them. It came out of him in the way things come out of people who have been holding them too long, not smoothly, in order, but with the pressure of something that has been compressed for years and finally has somewhere to go. For 40 minutes, Cole didn't move from the door. Evelyn didn't write anything down. She just listened with her whole face. The way she listened when the information was too important to risk fragmenting with the distraction of a pen. The shape of it was this. In 1878, Victor Harrington, who at that time went by a different name in a different territory, a fact that Crane delivered with the flat affect of someone confessing in church, had approached Crane with a proposal. Crane was the chief administrator of the Territorial Land Office. Also, at that time, deeply in debt following a series of personal financial disasters that he described only as poor decisions regarding land speculation, which Evelyn recognized immediately as the particular shame-adjacent language of a man who had gambled and lost. Harrington had offered to clear Crane's debts. In exchange, Crane would provide access to the restricted amendment files for a single weekend and look the other way while certain survey documents were updated. And had told himself it was a one-time thing. It was not a one-time thing. For the following 2 years, he had made 5 sets of alterations to surveys covering 23 properties across the territory. He named every property, he named every date. He described the exact nature of each alteration. Evelyn recognized 14 of the 23 from her diagram. The other 9 she had not yet reached. When Crane finished, it was very quiet. My father, he said. Theirs was controlled with visible effort. Did you know my father? Not well, Crane said. Will he ever do anything to you? Did he wrong you in some that? No, Crane said. He was an honest man. I knew that when I altered his survey. I knew that every time. He looked at his hands on the table. There is no version of what I did that has a justification. I'm not here looking for one. Then why are you here? Cole asked. Crane looked at Evelyn. Because he's moving again, Crane said. Evelyn went very still. Harrington, she said, 2 weeks ago, a man to my house in Billings, not to threaten me, to remind me. To remind me that everything I told him in 1878 was still his to use. If I ever spoke about what happened, he had documentation of my involvement that would ensure I faced criminal charges. Crane paused. The man also told me that Harrington was accelerating his timeline, that he had a complication. Crane looked at Evelyn steadily that he needed to resolve before the county land court date. I'm the complication, Evelyn said. Crane said. And when I got Mr. Bennett's telegraph, I understood that meant you were close, that you had found enough to make him nervous. He straightened in his chair, which meant I had a decision to make. You could have stayed in Billings, Evelyn said. I could have said nothing. I could have, Crane said. I've been making that choice for 7 years. Staying quiet. Staying safe. His voice dropped. I have a granddaughter. She's 4 years old. When I think about her growing up in a territory where men like Harrington operate without consequence because men like me choose their own safety over everyone else's. He stopped. I'm 71 years old, Miss Harper. I would rather spend whatever years I have left as a man who finally told the truth than as a man who died having never done it. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. She was not soft about it, but she was not cold either. Crane, she said, what you're offering is the single most important piece of evidence in this entire case. Witness account from the man who executed the forgeries with names, dates, and specifics that can be cross-referenced against the physical documents. She paused. I need you to understand what this means for you. Involvement cannot be hidden. Your testimony would be an admission of criminal conduct. I know, Crane said. You would need a lawyer. A good one. I know that too. And Harrington will come after you the moment he learns you've spoken. He will use everything he has. Crane looked at her without flinching. Enough? He asked. What I've given you, is it enough to stop him? Evelyn held his gaze. Mind with what I've already built, she said. We're getting from the amendment log. On Thursday, yes. Crane nodded once. Slowly. The nod of a man who has set something down that was very heavy and is not entirely sure his hands remember what it felt like to be empty. What you need to do, he said. Thursday night, Abel Torres unlocked the side door, the county recorder's office at 11:30 and let Cole and Evelyn in without a word. He led them to the amendment log by lamplight. Evelyn had the log open inside 90 seconds. She worked through it with the focused speed of someone who knew exactly what they were looking for, running her finger down columns of dates and names and file reference numbers, referencing against the list she had memorized from Crane's testimony and her own diagram. Cole stood behind her, watching the door. 8 minutes in, Ben said quietly, without turning around, he was here 4 times in the past 6 months. Briggs? Each time within 72 hours of a new Western Frontier claim filing. She turned a page, and here 3 months ago, the week before I was told my request for the original territorial records had been declined. Access the filing that would have been most directly relevant to my inquiry, and she stopped. Cole felt the stop in his spine. What? He said. He didn't alter it, Evelyn said. Pegged it. There's a notation, small, in pencil, in the margin. The kind of notation that tells the next person who pulls this file that it's been identified as sensitive. She looked up and updating forgeries. He was maintaining a warning system. Any file I requested, any file that got too much attention, got flagged so Harrington would know immediately. He's a tripwire, Cole said. He's a tripwire, Evelyn confirmed. And that means Harrington has known everything I've been doing since I arrived at the ranch. The words landed in the quiet office like a dropped stone in still water. Cole's jaw tightened. He knew about Crane's telegraph. He knew before Crane's telegraph, Evelyn said. He's known since the day you brought me here. She closed the log carefully. Precisely, which means the threat letter wasn't a warning. A test. To see if knowing he was watching would make me stop. It didn't, no, Evelyn said. Did it? She stood up, Abel. I need a certified copy of the amendment log entries from the past 6 months. There's every entry with Briggs' access notation. Abel, who had been standing in the corner pretending to be smaller than he was, nodded. I can have them by morning, he said. Have them by morning, Evelyn said. Left the office the way they came in. Side door, Park Street, the town of Red Hollow, sleeping around them, fully unaware that the case that would change its future had just crossed the threshold from evidence to proof. On the walk back to where the horses were tied, Cole said, make a move before the court date. Yes. How much time do we have? 18 days, Evelyn said. Enough? She looked at him in the dark. It has to be, she said. The move came sooner than 18 days. It came 4 days later, on a Sunday morning, when a group of 8 riders appeared on the road to Bennett Valley Ranch just after dawn. Harrington's regular, hired men. They were something else harder looking, with the particular economy of movement that came from men who had ridden a long way to do a specific thing and intended to do it efficiently. Danny saw them from the ridge where he'd been keeping watch and rode back to the ranch at full speed. He burst through the front door, shouting. Cole was up and had his rifle before Danny finished the sentence. Evelyn came out of the study. One look at Cole's face told her everything she needed to know about how serious this was. Not many, she said. 8, Danny said, still breathing hard. Armed? Yes, ma'am. Cole looked at her. Get the documents. Everything critical, the Crane testimony, the amendment log copies, original forged surveys. If they come onto this property, documents cannot be here. Where do I take them? Old Pete, Cole said immediately. As a place, a dry cave on the North Ridge, half a mile from here. He uses it for supply storage. Nobody knows about it except the ranch hands. He turned. Old Pete appeared from the bunkhouse doorway, already dressed, already carrying his own rifle with the casual ease of a man for whom a rifle was simply part of getting dressed. Riders on the South Road, Cole said. Pete nodded. Come from the north window. 8 men. Can you get Miss Harper to the North Cave? Already thinking it, Pete said. Evelyn was already back in the study. She was not panicking. Cole would remember that later, the way she moved in those next 4 minutes, with the focused efficiency of someone who had already, in the back of her mind, prepared for exactly this scenario. She had a system for the critical documents. She had them organized, wrapped in oilcloth against moisture, secured in a saddlebag that she had quietly assembled over the past week. Cole saw the saddlebag and understood that she had been ready for this longer than he had. Oh, he said. Cole, I know what I'm doing, he said. Oh. She looked at him for exactly 2 seconds. 2 seconds that held considerably more than 2 seconds worth of things neither of them had said yet. Then she went. The riders stopped at the property line. Their leader, a broad man on a gray horse with a face that had been broken and reset badly, at least twice called out across the yard. We're here on behalf of Western Frontier Holdings. Authorization to conduct a property survey of the premises. Cole stood on the front steps with his rifle across his arm and Hector Reyes at his right shoulder and Danny Marsh at his left, and he looked at the piece of paper the man was holding up from 40 yards away. That paper was filed on a Thursday, Cole said. The man blinked. Authorization requires 3 business days' notice to the property owner before execution, Cole said. Today is Sunday. You filed Thursday. That means you can come on this property Wednesday at the earliest. He looked at the man without hurry. You're welcome to wait. The man looked at the paper. Oh, then he looked at Cole. Then he looked at the paper again. Heck, he said. Wednesday, Cole said. I'll have coffee ready. The riders turned and left. It was quiet. Hector let out a long breath. Danny said, "What did you know about the 3-day notice?" "I've been listening to a very persuasive bookkeeper for 3 weeks," Cole said. He went inside and sent Danny to the North Ridge to bring Evelyn back. She came back 45 minutes later without the saddlebag, which meant the documents were still in the cave, which was exactly right. She walked into the kitchen, sat down, and said, "We need the court date moved up." Cole sat across from her. "Can we do that? If we file a countermotion with the evidence we have now, Crane's testimony, government log, the forged surveys, we can request an emergency hearing on the grounds of ongoing intimidation of witnesses and destruction risk to evidence." She looked at him. "I need a lawyer today. I know a man in Helena," Cole said. "Ride to Helena," Evelyn said. Cole stood up. "Evelyn," he said. She looked at him. "They came here because they're scared of what you've built," he said. "You understand that? 8 riders on a Sunday morning, that's not confidence. That's desperation." She looked at him steadily. Something in her face that composed, old, entirely guarded face that she had maintained through every threat and every long night and every near miss shifted. "Just enough. Ride fast," she said. Cole made it to Lena in 14 hours. He rode through the night, changed horses, once at a relay station 50 miles out, arrived at the office of a lawyer named Thomas Aldridge at 7 in the morning. Before the office opened, Aldridge had finished his breakfast, and considerably before Aldridge had any particular interest in receiving a dust-covered rancher on his front step. Aldridge was 60 years old, semi-retired, and had spent 20 years as a federal land attorney before the work had exhausted him into a quieter practice. Cole had met him twice. Once at his father's funeral, Aldridge had appeared without announcement and stood at the back of the church. Years before that, when Aldridge had handled a water rights dispute for a neighboring ranch, and Cole's father had said afterward that the man was the most honest lawyer he had ever encountered. Arthur Bennett's vocabulary was the legal equivalent of a saint. Cole knocked on the door. Aldridge opened it in a dressing gown, getting coffee, and looked at Cole for a moment. "Arthur Bennett's boy," he said. "There?" "Yes, sir." "You look like you've ridden all night." "Yes, sir." Aldridge stepped back from the door. "Men," he said, "tell me everything." Cole told him everything. 90 minutes. Aldridge listened, the way Evelyn listened completely. Interruption, with an attention that felt almost physical in its intensity. He asked 3 questions during the entire account. All 3 were precise, targeted, and revealed that he had understood the legal architecture of the situation faster than Cole had managed to articulate it. Cole finished. Aldridge was quiet for a moment. "Then," he said, "Evelyn Harper. I need to speak with her today. She's at the ranch. Then we ride today." Aldridge stood. "An hour to prepare, Mr. Aldridge," Cole said. "The emergency motion. I'm already drafting it in my head," Aldridge said. "I'll get your horse watered. Be back here in an hour." Cole went. Back to Bennett Valley by midnight. Evelyn was awake. Of course she was awake. And she met Aldridge in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and the organized evidence summary she had prepared, as though she had known a lawyer was coming. Cole suspected she had been preparing for longer than the past 24 hours. Aldridge read the summary in silence. He read it twice. There, he set it down and looked at Evelyn over the top of his reading glasses. "Let this in 3 weeks," he said. 26 days, Evelyn said. "With no subpoena power, no investigative authority, no institutional support." "Correct." Aldridge removed his glasses, polished them, replaced them. A ritual that Cole recognized as the ritual of a man giving himself a moment to choose his words. "Harper," he said, "in 30 years of federal land law, I have seen government investigators with full institutional resources take 6 months to build a case half this solid." Evelyn looked at him steadily. "It enough?" "It is more than enough," Aldridge said. "If Crane testifies, and I understand he has agreed to do so, combined with the amendment log documentation and the physical comparison of the forged surveys, a close case." He paused. "But this is a case where the only question is how many additional charges emerge during the proceedings." Cole felt something release in his chest, something that had been clenched since the morning the Western Frontier letter arrived. Evelyn did not visibly react. "The emergency motion," she said. "I'll file it in Helena tomorrow morning," Aldridge said. "I want the federal district court, not the county land court." Given the multi-jurisdictional nature of the fraud and the documented intimidation attempt the writers, last Sunday we have grounds for federal jurisdiction. He looked at her. It also takes it out of the hands of any local judge who may have existing relationships with Harrington. "How long until we get a hearing date, given the emergency motion grounds?" "Possibly less." Evelyn nodded once, the precise nod. "And we have 1 week to make sure every witness is protected and every document is secured." "Agreed," Aldridge said. Closed his folder and looked at Cole. "Your father kept extraordinary records. He knew someone would need them someday," Cole said. Aldridge looked at the wall where the diagram was visible through the open study door, the red lines and the black lines and the blue lines mapping 31 families and 30 years of calculated theft. "He was right," Aldridge said quietly. "The week before the hearing was the most dangerous week of all." And Harrington knew the emergency motion had been filed. He knew because it was a matter of public record the moment Aldridge submitted it. Whatever network of informants he had built over the years was clearly efficient enough to have the information to him within hours. He responded on 3 fronts simultaneously, which told Evelyn, who was tracking his moves the way she tracked everything, with careful attention and a running internal ledger, that he was no longer operating from a position of strategic patience, operating from fear. The first front was legal. Western Frontier Holdings filed their own motion in the county court, attempting to accelerate the original county hearing before the federal jurisdiction could be established. Aldridge handled this cleanly, a counter-filing that cited the existing federal motion and requested a stay of all county proceedings. A judge, a man named Harris, who Evelyn had privately identified 3 weeks ago as someone who had received 2 land transactions from a Western Frontier subsidiary under unusually favorable terms, recused himself the morning after Aldridge's filing. Evelyn suspected Harris had received a quiet word from someone who understood that being on the wrong side of a federal fraud proceeding was a career-ending position. The second front was personal. Letters arrived not at the ranch this time, but at the homes of 3 ranchers who had agreed to serve as additional witnesses. Letters were similar in tone to the one Evelyn had received. Threats, suggestions of legal exposure, implications that cooperation with the inquiry would lead to prolonged and expensive legal entanglement for the witnesses themselves. 2 of the 3 witnesses sent word to Cole that they were frightened. One of them, James Pearson, rode to the ranch himself, arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, and sat at the kitchen table, and he was clearly a man in the process of deciding between 2 versions of himself. "I have 4 kids," he said. "I know," Cole said. "If this goes wrong, if Harrington has enough pull to make this look different than it is, I lose everything. Not just the land dispute, my credibility, my standing in this community." "I know," Cole said again. "My grandfather filed that homestead," Pearson said. "He filed it honestly, and he worked it honestly, and he died on that land believing his family would be secure there." His voice was steady, but his hands on the table were not. "Arrestable. And now some man in a hotel suite has manufactured a claim out of paper and intimidation, and I'm supposed to—" He stopped. Evelyn, who had been standing in the study doorway, came and sat at the table across from Pearson. She did not offer comfort. Had learned that Pearson was not a man who wanted comfort. He was a man who wanted to understand the actual shape of what he was deciding. "James," she said, "I want to tell you exactly what the evidence shows, and exactly what that means for your case specifically," she told him. It took 20 minutes. She walked him through the forged survey alteration that applied to his property, the amendment log entry that showed the alteration had been made during the same session as the Bennett alteration, testimony that established who had directed both alterations and why, and the financial trail that showed Western Frontier's acquisition interest in his specific parcel predated their legal claim by 14 months, proof that the claim was manufactured to enable a purchase they had already decided to make. When she finished, Pearson was quiet. "So they targeted me specifically," he said, "before they sent the letter. Before any of this, they had already decided they wanted my land and then invented a legal reason to pressure me into selling it." "Yes," Evelyn said. "That's exactly what happened." Pearson looked at his hands on the table for a long moment. "Grandfather," he said. "Yes," Evelyn said, more gently this time. Pearson looked up. "I'll testify," he said. The third front was the one Evelyn had been afraid of since the Sunday riders. On Thursday, 4 days before the federal hearing, someone broke into the county recorder's office. Earl Torres sent word to the ranch at dawn. He had come in early to find the side door forced, the restricted amendment files pulled from their cabinets. Not taken LaFleur, scattered, as though whoever had come in was looking for something specific and had not found it. He read the message and brought it to Evelyn without a word. "Got it. Set it down." "The original amendment log," she said. "They were looking for the original." "Abel has our certified copies," Cole said. "I don't know that," Evelyn said. "Or they knew it and came anyway, hoping there was something in the original they could alter or remove that would undermine the copies." She paused. "Either way, they didn't find what they needed, because Abel moved the originals after we copied them," Cole said slowly. "As I asked Abel to move the originals after we copied them," Evelyn said. Cole stared at her. "When did you The night we were in the office, she said, him quietly, before we left, that the originals needed to be somewhere other than their standard location. That if anyone came looking, the standard location should appear undisturbed. You anticipated the break-in. I anticipated that Harrington would realize the amendment log was his vulnerability, Evelyn said. Once he knew we had certified copies, which he would know the moment Aldridge's motion detailed the evidence, the only move that made sense was to eliminate the originals and challenge the authenticity of the copies. Tried to take away our evidence. And failed, Evelyn said. But she said it simply, without triumph. The way you state a fact. I looked at her, this woman who had arrived on his ranch with one suitcase and rebuilt, in 26 days, the case that an entire town's machinery had tried to bury, and felt something that was beyond admiration and beyond gratitude, something that had no clean word for it except right. The sense that she was exactly who she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was supposed to be doing, and that he had been exactly right to run across that platform. He didn't say any of that. 3 days, he said. 3 days, she confirmed. The night before the hearing, nobody at Bennett Valley Ranch slept. Aldridge worked at the kitchen table, organizing his case materials. Cole sat with him for a while, then moved to the porch. Hector Reyes stayed in the yard, which was his quiet way of saying he was keeping watch. Old Pete was on the north ridge. Danny Marsh had fallen asleep in a chair by the front door, and nobody had the heart to move him. Evelyn was in the study. Cole knocked at 11. "Come in," she said. She was not at the desk. She was standing in front of the diagram on the wall, the one with the red and black and blue lines, looking at it in a way that was different from her working look. More still, Cole stood beside her. 31 families, she said. "They're one," he agreed. "Some of them don't know yet. Now tomorrow in that courtroom when Aldridge presents the full scope." She paused. "I keep thinking about that, about people who've been living under a cloud they couldn't see. Because of you, they'll see it," Cole said, "and then they'll see it lifted." She was quiet for a moment. "I almost got on that train," she said. "I know. If you hadn't," she stopped. "I did," Cole said. She turned to look at him. And in the lamplight, in the room that had been her entire world for nearly a month, Colorado, with the evidence of everything she had built, covering every surface around her, Evelyn Harper looked at Cole Bennett with nothing careful in her face at all. Just the real version, undiplomatically present. "How did you run?" she asked. "That morning, you could have sent a letter, have asked someone to pass a message. Instead, you rode 20 miles and ran across a platform like something was actually ending." Cole looked at her steadily. "As something was," he said. "I'd seen you, that day. Not to speak to. Twice in town. Once at the land office when I was there for a survey question. Always working, always moving like you had somewhere to be and a reason to be there. Then I heard you'd bought a train ticket, and I thought," he stopped. "What?" she said. "I thought, there goes someone the West cannot afford to lose." The room was very quiet. "Oh," Evelyn said. "I know," he said. "Tomorrow first." She looked at the diagram one more time. "Tomorrow first," she agreed. She went back to the desk. He went back to the porch, and the lamp in the study stayed on until the sky began to gray. And then they both got up and got ready and rode to Red Hollow together in the early morning, side by side, with Aldridge and Crane and James Pearson and Abel Torres, and every document Evelyn Harper had built into a weapon over the longest and most important month of both their lives. The courtroom in Red Hollow was small, and it was full. Word had traveled the way word always traveled in small western towns, was completely and instantaneously, and with the kind of thoroughness that no telegraph could match. People were standing against the walls, farmers and ranchers and shopkeepers, and the same people who had looked away from Evelyn Harper 7 months ago were packed into that room. The air was charged with the particular electricity of a community that has sensed, even before it understands why, that something is about to change. Victor Harrington sat at the defendant's table. He was well-dressed, posed. His lawyer, a man imported from St. Louis at considerable expense, sat beside him with a leather case of counter-arguments and a practiced expression of professional calm. Harrington looked across the room and found Evelyn Harper. Her the way powerful men look at people they have underestimated, with the expression of someone recalculating, rapidly and uncomfortably, the cost of a mistake they can no longer undo. Don't look back at him. She did not look away. Aldridge stood for 4 minutes before Harrington's lawyer interrupted with the first objection. The objection was overruled. Aldridge continued. He was methodical, precise, and entirely without theatrics, which made what he was saying more devastating, less, because there was nowhere for it to hide. He presented the forged surveys. He presented the amendment log. He presented the financial trail, showing Western Frontier's acquisition interest predating their legal claims. He presented Gerald Crane, who sat in the witness chair with the dignity of a man who has decided that the truth that costs him is the only thing left worth having, and testified to every alteration he had made, every instruction he had received, and the name of the man who had given those instructions. Harrington's lawyer objected 14 times. Every objection was overruled. Then James Pearson testified. Then Abel Torres. Then 2 other ranchers whose names Evelyn had found in the records and who had received letters from Western Frontier and had been carrying their fears silently for months. Each testimony landed in the courtroom the way stones land in still water, with a sound that ripples outward and does not stop. Harrington's lawyer made his case. He was skilled. Challenged Crane's credibility, a man who had admitted criminal conduct, whose testimony was self-serving, whose motivation for speaking now was questionable. He challenged the certified copies of the amendment log, raising technical objections about the chain of custody. He challenged the survey comparison methodology. The federal judge, a woman named Clara Whitmore, 50 years old, who had been on the bench for 12 years and had the face of someone who had heard many arguments and could tell the difference between a legal argument and a delay tactic, listened to all of it. Then she asked one question. She addressed it to Harrington's lawyer directly. "Counsel," she said, "your client's company filed legal claims against 23 properties, citing filing errors in the original homestead surveys. Can you produce any documentation of those alleged errors that predates the 1,879 amendment filings that your opposing counsel has demonstrated were made by a land office administrator who has testified under oath that he made them fraudulently at client's direction?" Harrington's lawyer was quiet for a moment. He said, "No," Judge Whitmore said. "I didn't think so." She ruled from the bench. It took 11 minutes. All Western Frontier claims against all 23 documented properties were invalidated. Properties acquired by Western Frontier through the scheme, 6 of them, purchased at below-market prices from families who had been coerced by the manufactured legal clouds, were ordered, returned, or compensated at full market value with damages. Victor Harrington was remanded to federal custody pending criminal fraud charges. Briggs was arrested outside the courtroom by a federal marshal who had been waiting quietly by the door since the session began. The room was very quiet for a moment after the ruling. Then James Pearson, in the 3rd row, made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob, and was entirely human, the sound of a man who has been carrying something crushing for a long time and has just been permitted to put it down. The room was not quiet at all. Cole, standing at the back against the wall, across the crowded, noise-filled courtroom at Evelyn Harper, who was sitting at Aldridge's table with her hands folded in front of her and her back straight and her expression composed. Then she looked back at him, and she smiled. Not the careful, controlled, almost smile he had seen over the past month. A real one, full and genuine, and completely undefended, the smile of a woman who had just done the thing she came to do. Cole felt it land in his chest like the first real breath after a long time underwater. Pulled back. Martha Dawes, the woman who had stopped sitting with Evelyn at church, pushed through the crowd and reached Evelyn's side and took both her hands and said something that Cole couldn't hear from where he stood. Whatever it was, Evelyn listened to it with a stillness that was different from her professional stillness. Open, more real. Then the crowd surged and Cole lost sight of her for a while. He didn't worry about it. She knew where the ranch was. She found him on the front steps of the ranch house that evening. The room had emptied slowly, the way courtrooms always empty after something enormous has happened, with people lingering and talking and needing to stand close to other people who had witnessed the same thing, as though proximity could help them understand it. Aldridge had handled the immediate legal aftermath. Pearson had shaken Evelyn's hand with both of his and held on for a moment longer than a handshake required. Torres had stood in the corner of the room with the expression of a young man who had just understood for the first time and completely what his law correspondence course was actually for. Evelyn had spoken to all of them. She had answered to every question, received every expression of gratitude, and done it all with the composure that she wore, the way other people wore skin habitually, automatically, completely. Then she had ridden back to Bennett Valley alone. Cole had still been somewhere in the crowd when she left. She had seen him briefly through the press of people talking to two ranchers she recognized from the witness list. His hand on one man's shoulder, his head bent in the particular way he bent it when he was listening hard. She had not interrupted. She had ridden home. And now she was sitting on the front steps in the early evening, and she was not composing herself, not organizing documents, not running analysis on anything at all. She was simply sitting there, feeling the weight of the past month leave her body by degrees, the way heat leaves a stone after the sun goes down slowly, completely, leaving warmth in the deep places long after the surface has cooled. She heard reckless before she saw Cole the mare's particular footfall on the dry road, recognizable now after weeks of hearing it depart and return. Unsaddled reckless in the yard spoke to her quietly for a moment in that private way he spoke to the horses, when he thought nobody was listening, and then came and sat on the step beside Evelyn. Not close enough to be presumptuous, close enough to be present. They sat in silence for a while. Pennington is in federal custody, Cole said finally. I know, Evelyn said. Aldridge says the criminal proceedings will take months, or maybe a year. I know that too. He also says he's going to need someone to consult on the property recovery cases. The 6 families who sold under duress working out the compensation, valuation disputes, the deed restorations. He said it's going to be the most complex land recovery work he's done in 30 years. Evelyn was quiet. There? He mentioned your name, Cole said. I assumed he would. Cole looked at her profile, the particular stillness of her face that he had spent a month learning to read, that he now knew was not blankness but its opposite, was fullness so carefully contained that it appeared, on the outside, as nothing. You could do that work from Boston, he said. Aldridge has contacts in both cities. He said he could establish a correspondence arrangement. He mentioned that too? He mentioned a lot of things. Evelyn looked at the yard, Valley, beyond it, at the land that Arthur Bennett had spent 30 years building a careful paper fortress around, as he understood that the land itself was not enough, that you had to be able to prove it. I grew up in Boston, she said. I know exactly what my life looks like there. I knew it before I came west, and I know it now. She paused. A good life. It's a respectable life. There are things I'm good at, and I could do them there and be compensated fairly and live quietly. Cole waited. I've spent the past month doing something I've never done before, she said. I've been doing work that matters in a place where it matters immediately. Abstractly, not eventually. Immediately to specific people, with names whose land I can see from this porch. She turned to look at him. I don't know how to go back to the abstracted version after that. Cole held her gaze. Don't, he said. Evelyn. He said her name the way he rarely said it fully, deliberately, without the professional remove of Miss Harper. I am not asking you to stay because I need a land records consultant. Aldridge can find a consultant. I'm not asking you to stay because you have no other options. I have several, and we both know it. I am not asking you to stay out of gratitude for what you've done for this ranch, because what you've done is beyond anything that gratitude adequately covers. She was very still. What are you asking? She said. I'm asking because when you're not here, Cole said. Oh, this place feels like it's missing a thing I didn't know it needed until it was here. And that's he stopped. Started again. That's not something I know how to be articulate about. I'm better with land than with language. But I know the difference between a ranch that's running correctly and a ranch that's running correctly but missing something essential. I've known it every minute since I met you. The step was very quiet between them. You ran across a train platform for a woman you'd never spoken to, Evelyn said. A rumor and a train ticket. Yes. That is either the most reckless thing I've ever heard of or the most certain. Probably both, Cole said. Evelyn looked at the valley again. I'm not easy, she said. I think you've established that by now. I wasn't looking for easy. I work strange hours, and I think in ledgers and I am entirely incapable of leaving a discrepancy alone once I've noticed it. I've noticed. I'll argue with you when I think you're wrong. You've done that already, and I was right every time. You were right every time, Cole agreed. The corner of her mouth moved. I need an office, she said, a real one, with proper filing space and a window that gets morning light. Cole felt something shift in his chest, the same loosening he had felt on the train platform when she said she'd give him 2 minutes. Deeper now, more permanent. My father's study has a window that gets morning light, he said. Oh, Evelyn said. I've been working in it for a month. Then you already know where it is. She was quiet for one more moment. Right, Cole Bennett. That was all. The way she said it, the way she said his name, of names, the way she said all right with the full weight of someone who made decisions completely when they made them at all, was everything. Exhaled. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath since the train platform. The weeks that followed moved differently than the weeks before. Time had been a resource, something to be rationed and tracked and spent carefully, because there were only 45 days and every one of them mattered. Time opened up into something else, not slower exactly. Different, the way a river moves differently in the wide, flat places than it moves in the narrow ones, still moving, going somewhere, but with room to breathe. Evelyn threw herself into the recovery work with the same focused intensity she had brought to building the case. The 6 families who had sold their properties under duress needed individual legal strategies. Each situation was different. Each property had its own complications. Each family had its own particular constellation of fear and hope and what they were willing to fight for. Aldridge came to the ranch twice a week, sometimes 3 times. Evelyn worked the documents. Aldridge worked the courts. On them, they were a machine. But there was something different about this phase. The fraud case. Evelyn had been alone with the documents, just her and the records and the relentless internal process of analysis. Now, seen across the kitchen table from families who came to the ranch seeking help. She was doing something she had never quite done before in her professional life. She was with people. Margaret Tilson came on a Tuesday in October, a woman in her late 40s whose husband had died of a fever 2 years earlier, leaving her the 300 acres they had built together and the 2 adult sons who worked it. Stern Frontier had pressured her into a sale 6 months ago at 60 cents on the dollar, threatening that if she didn't sell voluntarily, the court claim would cost her the entire property plus legal fees. She had sold. She had packed her things. She and her sons were living in a rented house in town while their land sat under Western Frontier management. Mother sat at the kitchen table and put her hands flat on the surface and said, I knew it wasn't right. I knew it in here. She touched her sternum. I was alone, and I didn't have anyone who could read those papers. They sent a lawyer, and she stopped. I just couldn't see a way through. Evelyn sat across from her, reach across and pat Margaret's hand. She did not offer the automatic comfort of someone performing sympathy. She said your sale was made under documented coercion, using a fraudulent legal claim as leverage. The coercion is a matter of federal record. Fraudulent claim has been formally invalidated. Property will be returned to you, Margaret, not compensated at 60 cents on the dollar returned. Full title, with damages. Margaret looked at her. The land, she said. Your land, Evelyn said. Margaret Tilson had been holding herself together with the particular rigid posture of a woman who has decided she is finished crying. Because crying didn't fix anything, her face in her hands and came apart. Evelyn sat with her through it. Cole, passing the kitchen doorway on his way to the yard, stopped and looked in and saw the 2 women at the table, one shaking. One steady and understood something that had been forming in him for weeks. Evelyn Harper had not saved Bennett Valley Ranch. She had done that too. It wasn't the thing. She had come to the West and been broken by it, used and discarded and told she didn't belong. And instead of letting that become the end of her story, she had built from it something that now sat across kitchen tables from broken people and handed them back what they had lost. Paul went to the yard. He had fence posts to set and cattle to check and about 47 things on his daily list, all of them with the quiet, deep satisfaction of a man whose ranch is intact and whose house has become, anyone planning it exactly, a place where people come when they need help. The twist came in November. Nobody had seen it coming. Evelyn, who prided herself on seeing things before they arrived. Aldridge, who had 30 years of federal land law experience. Even Cole, who had grown up in this valley and knew its currents. It came in the form of a letter from the territorial governor's office. Aldridge brought it to the ranch himself, which told Evelyn before she opened it that the contents were either very good or very complicated. Aldridge's face suggested complicated. The letter was from the governor's legal counsel, alleged the federal court ruling in the Harrington case. It expressed the governor's personal commitment to land rights and the protection of honest settlers. The extraordinary nature of the evidence compiled in the case and the important precedent established by the ruling. And then it contained a request. The territorial government, said, was in the process of establishing a new Office of Land Records Integrity, a permanent agency whose purpose would be to conduct ongoing audits of territorial land records, investigate complaints of fraud, and provide legal support to settlers who lacked resources to defend their property rights. The governor was requesting that Evelyn Harper serve as its first director. Home was very quiet after Aldridge finished reading it aloud. Cole looked at Evelyn. Evelyn looked at the letter. Government position, she said. A senior government position, Aldridge said. Institutional authority. Subpoena power. A staff. Budget. He paused. Everything you did in this case without any of those things you could do routinely, actual resources, at a territorial scale. Evelyn set the letter down on the desk, stood up, walked to the window, stood there with her arms folded. Cole watched her. He knew what the offer was. He understood it completely, not just what it was professionally, it meant for everything else. A government office meant Helena. It meant a formal institutional role, a permanent appointment, a position of real authority in the structure of the territory. It meant exactly the kind of career that a woman of Evelyn Harper's ability had deserved from the beginning and been denied at every turn. It also meant leaving Red Hollow. It meant leaving the ranch. He said nothing. He had told her he wasn't asking her to stay out of need. He had meant it. And meaning it meant meaning it now, but in this moment, when it actually cost him something. Evelyn stood at the window for a long time. Then she turned. Cole first. Not at Aldridge, at Cole. And what she was looking for in his face, he understood, was not permission. She wasn't asking his permission. She was looking for something else, for what was real. But for the truth of what was between them, separate from what she might do about it. He gave her the truth. He kept his face open, present, completely honest. She looked at him for 3 seconds that felt considerably longer. Then she turned to Aldridge. The office would be based in Helena, she said. Already across the entire territory? Not just specific counties. Territorial jurisdiction, Aldridge confirmed. Of how many? To start, the letter indicates 3 investigators and 2 clerical positions, with the expectation of expansion based on caseload. The governor understands that the caseload will be significant. I believe the governor understands that better than anyone in the scope of what you uncovered in this case alone. Evelyn nodded slowly. The governor's counsel, I will reply within the week, she said. Aldridge nodded. He picked up the letter. He looked between the two of them with the expression of a man who was experienced enough to know when a room contained more conversation than he was party to, and excused himself with professional grace. The door closed behind him. Paul and Evelyn were alone in the study. Say what you're thinking, Evelyn said. Mercy. I'm thinking, Cole said carefully, that this is the thing you should have been offered years ago. That this is the career that was taken from you before you ever had the chance to build it. And that you should take it. Evelyn looked at him. And she said, and I'm thinking that Helena is 4 hours from here by horse and considerably less by train, he said. And that Bennett Valley Ranch is going to need ongoing legal consultation on a variety of land records matters for the foreseeable future. Professional consultation, Evelyn said. Among other things, Cole said, you are being extremely careful with your words right now. I am trying very hard, Cole said, not to be the reason you make a decision one way or the other. This is your life, Evelyn. Your career. I have no claim on either of those things. You don't, she agreed. Also, whatever you decide. He stopped. I am going to take the position, she said. It's the right thing to do, and because I am genuinely the right person for it, and because there are hundreds of families across this territory who need exactly what that office can provide. I know, he said. And I'm going to take it, she continued, from a base of operations at Bennett Valley Ranch, at least for the initial months while the office is being established, as Helena, in the winter, requires a different housing arrangement than I currently have time to organize. And your father's study has the best filing system I have ever worked in, and I am not giving it up without a significant fight. Cole looked at her. And looked back at him with those gray eyes that he had spent a month learning the full language of. Coming back, he said. I'm not leaving, she said. I'm expanding the radius. Cole stood up, crossed the room in 3 strides, and he stopped in front of her, and they looked at each other from 18 inches apart. And everything that had been building since a dusty train platform in the summer was right there between them, fully present, requiring no further building. Evelyn Harper, he said. Cole Bennett, she said. He kissed her. She kissed him back with the same decisive completeness she brought to everything, not hesitant, not tentative, not qualified, all the way or not at all. When they stepped back, her composure was not remotely intact, and she did not appear to be bothered by this fact. Well, I have 17 active property recovery cases, she said. Oh. And a governor's letter to respond to. I know that too. And I need to send word to Aldridge about the staffing structure, because if he hires investigators without my input, he'll get people who are good at legal procedure and terrible at document analysis, which is exactly backwards for this kind of work. Evelyn. Yes? It can wait 20 minutes. She looked at him. Yes, she said. He laughed. She laughed too, the real version, started one, and it filled the room the way it had filled the kitchen that one time weeks ago, and they had both surprised themselves with it. Then they sat down together, and she drafted the response to the governor's council, it over her shoulder, and made one suggestion that she incorporated without comment, the closest thing to a declaration of partnership that either of them was likely to produce for some time. Winter came to Bennett Valley. Came the way Montana winters come decisively, apology, converting everything familiar into something harder and starker and, in one way, more honest. The land stripped down to its essential self. I went pale and enormous. The sound of the creek changed pitch. Helen worked from the study and traveled to Helena twice a month for the formal establishment of the Office of Land Records Integrity. Hired 2 of the 3 investigators herself, interviewed them personally, selected them based on a combination of legal training and the ability to read a land survey without flinching at the details, a criterion that eliminated most of the initial applicants and identified 2 exceptional ones. She wrote to the territorial land offices in 3 counties, publishing reporting protocols. She began building the case archive that would serve as the foundation for future investigations, organized, referenced, searchable. She trained the clerical staff with the precision of someone who understood that the system was only as good as the people maintaining it. Paul watched her build it. He did not watch passively, he was part of it, in the particular way that people who share a life become part of each other's work without anyone planning for that to happen. He knew the investigation schedules. He knew which cases were moving fast and which were stalled. He knew when Evelyn was working through a problem because she went quiet in a different way, not the working quiet, the stuck quiet, and he learned what she needed in those moments. which was usually either coffee, silence, or to be asked the right question. Not good at asking the right question. She, in turn, got good at knowing when a piece of equipment had failed on the ranch, or a fence line had a problem, or one of the hands was dealing with something before Cole had said a word. As she had learned the particular set of small signals that composed Cole Bennett's interior weather. Partners, they did not perform their partnership. They just lived it in the daily ordinary texture of two people who have decided to occupy the same world and have found that the world is better for the decision. Earl Crane pleaded guilty to the criminal land fraud charges in December. He received a suspended sentence contingent on full cooperation with the federal investigation into Harrington's wider activities and the completion of 200 hours of community service assisting the Office of Land Records Integrity with its historical case review. The arrangement was Evelyn's idea. She had argued it to Aldridge with characteristic precision. Crane's knowledge of the specific methodology used to execute the survey forgeries was more valuable applied to identifying additional cases than it was imprisoned. And he knew what to look for because he had done the looking in reverse. He was 71 years old in poor health and posed no ongoing threat. And he had, when it counted, chosen to tell the truth. Aldridge had presented the arrangement to the federal prosecutor. Federal prosecutor who had reviewed Evelyn's case file and had the professional respect of someone looking at craftsmanship that exceeded anything they expected to find, agreed. Crane came to the office once a week. He and Evelyn worked across the desk from each other with the particular professional formality of two people who have an understanding that does not require being discussed. He identified 3 additional sets of fraudulent survey amendments in the first-month properties that had not been part of the original Harrington case, suggesting the methodology had been used before Harrington, possibly by an earlier operator whose activities had never been investigated. There's a whole history under this history, Crane told Evelyn one January morning. She said, "It could take years. I know that too." He looked at her across the desk. "Does that bother you?" Evelyn looked at the open file in front of her. At the familiar architecture of a land record, the survey language, dates, the signatures, the small precise notations that told a careful reader whether a document was what it claimed to be or something else entirely. "Oh," she said, "it doesn't." She meant it. Victor Harrington's federal trial began in February. The 11 days. On the 3rd day, a second set of charges was added: conspiracy to obstruct justice, based on the break-in at the county recorder's office and the documented surveillance of Bennett Valley Ranch. On the 6th day, a former associate of Harrington's from his time in Kansas City appeared as a surprise witness, testifying about a similar scheme that had been run in Missouri 5 years earlier under the different name that Crane had mentioned, confirming what Evelyn had suspected from the beginning, that Red Hollow was not where this started. It was simply where it ended. 11th day, the jury was out for 4 hours. They came back with guilty verdicts on all counts. Harrington was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The judge brought the verdict to the ranch. Evelyn was in the study. Cole was in the yard. They received the news separately, 5 minutes of each other, and then came to the kitchen and stood across the table, and Aldridge looked between them and said, "It's done." Neither of them said anything for a moment. Cole said, 12 years. "Minimum," Aldridge said. "The Missouri charges still pending. There may be additional time." Evelyn nodded. She looked at the kitchen table, the same table where James Pearson had sat with his hands unsteady and his grandfather's land on the line, where Margaret Tilson had come apart and then put herself back together. Old Crane had told his truth over a cup of coffee he barely touched. "Not done," she said. Aldridge looked at her. "Work," she said. "The historical cases Crane identified. Families who don't know yet that what happened to them has a name and a remedy." She looked at him. "Work is done. The work isn't." Aldridge smiled the small, precise smile of a man who had known her from the moment he read her evidence summary on that midnight kitchen table exactly who he was dealing with. "No," he agreed. "The work isn't." He left them to it. Spring came to Bennett Valley. The creek went loud again. The pastures came green. All moved differently, the particular ease of animals that had spent a hard winter and were now in soft grass, unhurried. Cole and Evelyn rode the East Meadow pasture on a Saturday morning in April, the pasture that Western Frontier had claimed. It had been the official beginning of all of it. Theirs was now unambiguously and documentably and permanently part of Bennett Valley Ranch, without particular purpose, which was a luxury that Cole had always had and Evelyn was learning. She was getting better at it. I had a letter from a woman in Bozeman, Evelyn said. Her husband's bought a homestead 2 years ago. She says the land office told them last month that there's a question about the original filing. Is there? I don't know yet. Well, but the phrasing of the letter she described, the way they framed the question sounds familiar. Cole looked at her. You think it's another one? I think it might be the beginning of another one, Evelyn said. And conviction was public. Anyone running a similar scheme would have seen it and either stopped or gone careful. Careful isn't stopped. And there's enough money in territorial land acquisition that someone will try again. And when they do, Cole said, with authority and staff, and a director who has done this before. Yes, Evelyn said. And that director needs backup from a cowboy who knows the valley and can ride anywhere in the territory in a day. Cole said, Cowboy is available. Evelyn looked at him. Steering light was doing something to his face that she had noticed before and had categorized. First time she noticed it as a variable she needed to account for in her thinking. She had stopped trying to account for it some time ago and had simply decided it was part of the landscape of her life now, which was a deeply unscientific approach that she had made her peace with. You know, she said, for a man who claimed he was better with land than with language, and considerably more articulate. I've had good company, Cole said. Evelyn looked at the pasture, at the land that was still here, whole, still the thing Arthur Bennett had built it to be. There would have been glad, she said. Cole was quiet for a moment. I'd have liked you, he said. He would have said, you were precise, which for him was the highest compliment. He would have been right. He usually was. They rode back to the ranch in the late morning, side by side at the easy pace of people who are not in a hurry because they are exactly where they are going. Years later, travelers passing through Montana would stop at Bennett Valley and ask to see the study where the case had been built. Always sent them to Evelyn, who was usually in that study, who would look up from whatever she was working on and explain, in the patient and precise way she explained everything, just that the study was a working office, not a museum, and they were welcome to look if they stayed out of the way of the filing system. Most of them stayed. Most of them left with something they hadn't arrived, with a clearer sense of what it meant for one person to see something that everyone else refused to look at it anyway, and to keep looking until the looking became proof and the proof became justice, and the justice became something that lasted. Office of Land Records Integrity, under Evelyn Harper's directorship, investigated and resolved over 200 cases of land fraud in its first decade. Established the documentary standards and investigative protocols that would later be adopted by federal land offices across the Western Territories. There were 19 investigators, 12 of them women, all of whom Evelyn selected with the same criteria she had applied to the first two: legal training and the ability to read a land survey without flinching at the details. Cole Bennett served on the Territorial Land Advisory Board for 11 years. He was not a political man and had no interest in becoming one. He understood land and he understood people, and he could tell the difference between policy that protected ordinary settlers and policy that only appeared to. The distinction mattered. He made sure it was heard. They married quietly. On a Wednesday, in the fall of 1887, Aldridge stood as witness. Old Pete cried, which he denied afterward with considerable vigor. Marsh, who was 17 by then and had grown 3 inches and was studying correspondence law in the evenings, on Abel Torres's recommendation, that was too long and entirely sincere. Thus Garza made the cake. It was by all accounts a very good cake. Arthur Bennett's study remained exactly as it was. The day Evelyn first walked into it, the same shelves, the same oak desk, the same filing cabinets with their large deliberate labels. Blotting paper with the original diagram had been replaced by better ones over the years. The first one, Evelyn, had made the red lines and the black lines and the blue lines of the Harrington case was framed on the wall beside the window. As decoration, as a reminder, this is what one person can see when they are willing to look. This is what one person can build when they refuse to stop. This is what justice looks like. Before it is justice, when it is still just lines on paper, connections between facts, a pattern that the powerful are betting you will never recognize. This is what changes everything. The train that had almost taken Evelyn Harper away from Red Hollow forever became, in the telling of it, the moment the story truly started, not the departure, a turning back. Not the leaving, but the decision to stay. Cole Bennett, who had run across that platform with no authority and no plan, and nothing but the absolute certainty that letting her leave would be a loss the West could not afford, turned out to be right about exactly one thing, which was enough. He had seen her worth before anyone else did. She had done the rest, and the West was never the same again.